Hello, my friends. Today in the US, statements continue to surface showing that the war has reached a deadlock and so far there is no real way to end it. Senator Marco Rubio made several striking comments which sparked a major scandal.
Solution to this crisis.
Right.
It will have to end in a negotiated settlement. And the fundamental challenge we have in Ukraine is this. Russia wants what they do not currently have and are not entitled to, and Ukraine wants what they cannot regain militarily. And that's been the crux of the challenge.
Unfortunately, Rubio either doesn't want to understand or just doesn't get it that wars do end through negotiations, but those negotiations almost always come after victory on the battlefield. And we really don't want that victory to belong to Russia. That's why, if the US stands for justice, it should have provided Ukraine with lend-lease support, especially after taking away its nuclear weapons year ago, uh, years ago, and helped Ukraine defeat the Russians. Then negotiations could begin, showing the world that justice still exists. But instead, the US has made itself look weak. And today, the situation in Ukraine continues to deteriorate rapidly. Even a US senator criticized Rubio for his actions and accused him of undermining America's global leadership. Here is what she said.
I'm going to get right into it. Secretary Rubio, I'm going to embrace my Jewish mother instincts for a moment. So as a mother, a senator, and a fellow human being, I can tell you that I'm not even mad anymore about your complicity in this administration's destruction of U.S. global leadership. I'm simply disappointed. And I wonder if you're proud of yourself in this moment when you go home to your family, because I've always found you, Senator Rubio, to be a bipartisan, pragmatic partner, a true believer that the U.S. is stronger when we lead with diplomacy and development. You have a strong record on this, but I don't recognize Secretary Rubio, a stalwart support of Israel. You've watched this administration abandon Saudi normalization with Israel in order to pursue business deals. You were once a fierce critic of Vladimir Putin, but you sat idly by as the president berated the elected leader of Ukraine for not capitulating to Russia. And worst of all, you've kneecapped foreign assistance, including programs that you previously championed and made America less safe, less strong, less prosperous in doing so. I know you know this in your heart, and I can't make this point any better than you did yourself in 2019 when you said, anybody who tells you that we can slash foreign aid and that will bring us to balance is lying to you. So with that, I'm just going to move on to my questions. Thank you.
As you can see, she delivered a powerful rebuke of Rubio's actions and of the Trump administration overall. But later, in his defense, Rubio claimed that aid is still being sent to Ukraine. However, he clarified that this aid isn't coming from Trump. It's still from Biden-era commitments. And as for any new aid packages under Trump, it's highly unlikely they'll be hidden to Ukraine.
It's not up for me to decide. The White House would have to make a determination about whether to come to Congress for a supplemental. But everything that's been approved and congressionally appropriated is ongoing. In fact, to the extent that the Ukrainians have asked for anything additional, what they've asked for is air defenses, Patriot units, which frankly we don't have. But we are working closely with our NATO allies. There are NATO allies that do have some batteries of Patriot missiles that they could provide or transfer over to the Ukrainians to defend, for example, the airspace of Kyiv and other places. And we've been encouraging in that front and working alongside our partners there to get deliveries of some of these systems. As you can imagine, none of these countries want to give up their Patriot systems either. But we can't make them fast enough. And part of the challenge we have in Ukraine is that munitions are being expended substantially faster.
So, essentially, he's dodging the real questions and refusing to directly address the criticism directed at him and the Trump administration. Friends, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Meanwhile, on the front lines, the situation remains extremely difficult. Let's start with the Chasiv Yar area. What was once considered the Turets and Chasiv Yar directions are now essentially combined into one, the Kostyantynivka direction. All offensive operations in these two areas are now clearly aimed at one goal: to break through to Kostyantynivka from both sides and encircle the city. The plan is to conduct massive shelling and force the Ukrainian forces to retreat, but most likely that's not going to happen anytime soon. The fight is expected to drag on, even in Chasiv Yar, the Ukrainian forces are holding its ground and continue to destroy advancing Russians. Today, Russian forces are actively assaulting the areas of Pretechene and Pishchivka in an attempt to surround Ukrainian forces troops. They're also trying to push through open fields toward Bila and Delivka. The situation is very difficult and Russian activity has increased, but so far there have been no changes in territory over the past 24 hours. The fighting continues. In the Kostyantynivka direction, Russian forces are not currently attempting an encirclement, and attacks near Yablonivka have ceased for now. However, they are still trying to force the Ukrainian forces to retreat by exerting pressure along the entire front line near the villages of Stara Mykolaievka, Zorya, and Novospassky. They are also storming the area around Zabalka despite very high Russian activity, including continued artillery fire and the extensive use of FPV drones. There have been no changes in the front line over the past 24 hours. In the Pokrovsk direction, Russian forces are also pushing hard in an effort to encircle Pokrovsk. They failed to advance near Udachne, which was part of their previous plan to surround the city. Now they've shifted their focus to the areas around the villages of Koptiva and Popivyar. And unfortunately, they are seeing some success. There, the situation is becoming critical. The attacks continue daily and Russian activity remains intense. Russian troops are also trying to break through to the outskirts of Myrnohrad, assaulting the villages of Lysivka, Chunishine, Zvirove, Udachne, and Novosergiyevka. Today, there is still a chance to hold the advance if Ukraine manages to launch powerful counterattacks near Nova Poltavka and Novoolenivka. The goal would be to cut off this portion of the front before the Russians can expand it further. But resources must be redirected to this direction instead of being used for offensive operations inside Russian territory. Right now, significant amounts of equipment and trained troops are being allocated for cross-border operations, breaking several kilometers into Russian defensive lines. Yet, this kind of offensive is exactly what's needed here to protect three major Ukrainian cities: Kostyantynivka, Myrnohrad, and Pokrovsk. If the front line could be stabilized from Nova Poltavka to Alexandropol, it would break Russian plans. But for now, we're waiting to see what decisions Ukraine's general staff will make. According to Ukrainian forces soldiers on the ground, Russian troops are advancing rapidly. Here, it won't be possible to hold the line for much longer, and the front may collapse. Myrnohrad direction. At the moment, the Russians are concentrating on advancing toward Novoekonomichne from the T0504 highway and along the Kazeni Torets River. They achieving tangible tactical gains. Fighting is still ongoing for the villages of Malinivka and Mirolubivka, but judging by the current dynamics, it's unlikely that the defense can hold out for much longer. In Mirolubivka, the clashes began relatively recently, yet the defensive line there collapsed rather quickly. If this this village is lost, the battles will shift directly to Novoekonomichne, and that would mark a major problem for the overall defense of Myrnohrad. Unfortunately, the Russians are now successfully forming a left flank panzer aimed at the Pokrovsk-Myrnohrad agglomeration. The right flank has been more or less established since winter. It seems that the Russians have decided to play a game of guess where will deploy the main forces of the entire summer campaign. Because this narrow corridor between Pokrovsk and Kostyantynivka, the Myrnohrad-Turesk isthmus, could cause a great deal of trouble. It effectively allows Russian forces to keep shifting the focus of their main efforts at will. And to think, all of this started with just another failed troop rotation. Where have we seen this before? Could it really have been near Turetsky a year ago? No, surely no. Yet there is this sense of deja vu. Once again, we are stepping on the same rake. In the Novopavlivka direction, Russian forces are pushing through near Kotlarivka and are actively assaulting Troitske, Oleksiivka, and Bogatyr. As of now, the Ukrainian General Staff hasn't officially confirmed the loss of Bogatyr, but soldiers on the ground report that some Ukrainian units are still attempting to hold parts of the village. However, the number of Russian troops is overwhelming, and it seems to be only a matter of time before Ukraine is forced to completely withdraw from the area. In reality, due to the immense pressure across the entire front line, defensive efforts are no longer holding, and the front is gradually beginning to shift. In the Velika Novosilka direction, Russian forces continue to aggressively assault the areas of Vilne Pole, Zelene Pole, and Novopil. Heavy shelling persists, but over the past 24 hours there have been no confirmed territorial changes. For now, all attacks in this area are being successfully repelled. In the Zaporizhia direction, Russian forces are assaulting Mala Tokmachka and Stepove, continuing to apply artillery pressure. However, activity in this sector has once again decreased, and there are currently no significant breakthroughs along the front line. In the Kherson direction, Russian troops are attempting to advance on the islands and continue shelling the right bank of the Dnipro River. Despite this, they have made no gains, and the situation has remained unchanged over the past 24 hours. In the Siversk direction, Russian forces have intensified the assaults in an attempt to advance toward Siversk. They attacking the settlements of Serebryanka, Grigorivka, Bilogorivka, and pushing near Verkhnyokamensky. Over the past 24 hours, there have been no changes on the ground, and all attacks have been successfully repelled so far. In the Liman direction, Russian activity remains high. Russian troops are assaulting Zarichne, Ямполівка, Зелена Долина, Рідкодуб, Новий Мир, and Olgivka. Despite the intensity, no changes in territorial control have been observed in the past day. In the Borova direction, Russian forces are assaulting Boguslavka and Kopanki. However, they have made no progress, and the front line has remained unchanged over the past 24 hours. In the Kupiansk direction, Russian activity is minimal, with occasional attacks near Pishane. The front line remains stable, and this direction doesn't appear to be a current priority for Russian forces. It seems that they are lacking sufficient resources, although FPV drone activity remains highly intense. In the area of Dvorichna, Russian forces are attempting to advance toward Kutkivka. However, activity remains low, with only a few attacks reported in the past 24 hours, and the front line remains unchanged. In the Kharkiv direction, no new assaults have been reported and the number of shelling is minimal. However, Ukrainian forces report that Russia has begun using FPV drones against Kharkiv itself. This raises significant concern that they may soon target logistics routes, which could pave the way for renewed assaults. Currently, fighting is ongoing only for Vovchansk, where Russian forces have made no gains, and the front line has remained stable over the past day. In the Sumy and Kursk directions, fighting continues, but the situation remains stable with no changes on the front line. A video appeared online showing a Russian reconnaissance drone calmly flying over a Ukrainian forces training ground in Sumy region, directing an Iskander missile strike against our troops. The video of the missile attack allegedly targeting the training camp of the 1st Ukrainian Brigade near Shostka in Sumy region was released by the Russian Ministry of Defense. They claim the strike was carried out with an Iskander missile. According to their statements, up to 70 servicemen, including 20 instructors, were killed along with an ammunition depot and 10 pieces of equipment. The location of training grounds so close to the Russian border is at best criminal negligence and essentially state betrayal. This is a cynical execution of recruits. Platoon commander of the 24th Separate Assault Battalion Stanislav Bunyatov commented, "So far, Ukrainian authorities and military leadership haven't officially responded to these claims." As we can see, no comments. Meanwhile, after Ukraine observed that Russian motorcycle assault units were effective, the Ukrainian forces have decided to form their own first assault motorcycle company. Within the 425th Separate Assault Regiment Skalan, the first assault motorcycle company in the Ukrainian forces has been created. During training, fighters spent hundreds of hours behind the wheel and practiced shooting on the move, firing thousands of rounds. The result is a modern cavalry unit whose main task is to quickly break through Russian positions, conduct assault operations, and rapidly change the direction of attack. For some reason, this again repeats the Russian example. The first ones to start attaching protective nets to armored vehicles were the Russians. At first, everyone laughed, but then they started copying. Later, the Russians introduced protective nets on roads, and after a few months, Ukraine also began using this idea. Now, motorcycles will also be used in assaults. Friends, feel free to share your opinions in the comments. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.